Hello, everybody. How are we all doing today? I imagine if you were a fan of a particular character in the Egghead arc, probably not doing too well right now. It's a little bit of a tragedy, this chapter, and it's for that reason I'm not gonna go overboard with this, right? I'm not gonna, like, start off this review by dancing in with a top hat and a cane. I will just simply say at the beginning, and then we can move on. Called it. Alright, with that being said, it is One Piece, chapter 1120. We are out of the excessive one chapters. They were getting kind of, it's like chapter 111117 or whatever. No, it's chapter 1120. Really quick, to the point. Chapter 1120, titled Atlas. You know what? Okay, I'll give you something. Honestly, I think it would have been cooler if Oda would have elaborated a little bit more. You know how, like, whenever he does title a chapter where a character dies, like when Ashura Doji died back in Wano, it was like leader of the head mountain bandits, Ashura Doji, you know? I think Oda could have maybe been a little bit more elaborate with this. He could have been like chapter 1120, the fifth Vegapunk of Wrath, Atlas, you know, or something more dramatic. But just Atlas works as well. The cover page, you have Yamato, and Denjiro makes an appearance. I thought that some of the other scabbards were going to be making little cameo appearances during Yamato's cover story. So those kids that were throwing stones at Yamato in the last one as he traveled through the Kibi region, Denjiro just showed up and captured all of them in a net. And by the way, Denjiro, he got a little bit of a promotion. He is now the daimyo of Kibi. So this is interesting because the Kibi region was actually ruled by the Fugetsu clan before Kaido and Orochi took over. Not really sure. Denjiro was mentioned to be an orphan way back, you know, when he was like a boy going around the flower capital, like scamming people, right? So I don't think he's a member of the Fugetsu clan, and the Fugetsu clan might have been maybe not entirely wiped out, but all of the top echelons of it were probably annihilated. We know the daimyos were all killed, you know, during the battle with Kaido, and you know, especially the ones that were in the cave. With Yamato as well. So I don't think Denjiro has any connection to the Fugetsu clan, but it's like, hey, somebody needs to be the daimyo of these regions. So Denjiro, he's, you know, he knows pretty well about like leading things when he was the head of the Yakuza and all that. So he is the new daimyo, and he doesn't screw around when it comes to enforcing the law. He took over Kibi, and he's like, I'm gonna clean up this region of Wano. And like some kids are like throwing rocks at Yamato, and Denjiro is like, no exceptions. He like throws these kids in a net, and it's just like, I'm gonna throw them in prison for what they did. Now, it just says they're given a time out. It's like, yeah, no, I'm sure the kids will be fine. But, yeah, that's that. All right. So we're cutting to a flashback at Punk Hazard, all right? Punk Hazard, 26 years ago. I don't know why I'm doing the spooky voice. I mean, Punk Hazard is kind of spooky. Although it was significantly less spooky back then, because this is back before the nuke went off, before Caesar, you know, detonated the bomb and ruined the entire island, and long before Aokiji and Akainu's fight, okay? This is back when Punk Hazard was a rather verdant jungle island, okay? We see a little bit of it in the flashback, you know, during Punk Hazard itself, okay? And we actually see there were a bunch of research facilities scattered all over the island. Most of them were destroyed when the bomb went off, and then the subsequent battle between Akainu and Aokiji. The battle that, the building where all of the main battles take place in the Punk Hazard arc, like where Luffy ultimately defeats Caesar Clown, that was lab number 3. That was the one Caesar kind of turned into his own lab, you know, for the Smile production and the Sad production and everything like that. The one where Kaido and King were kept, because they were also at Punk Hazard for a time, and then Kaido broke out alongside with Albert, and they escaped. That was lab number 6, and that was like even before this. I think that was like well over 30 years ago, around there. But yeah, okay, so this is back in the day, 26 years ago. So right around this time, this would have been when Roger was still on his journey with Odin, and I think this was the same year they had discovered the One Piece, and then Roger became king of the pirates, and he turned himself in and everything like that, and he was eventually executed 24 years ago is when he kicked off the Great Pirate Era. think it was around 26, 25 years ago when he actually found the One Piece. This is a few years before the disaster of Ohara, and we see Clover. So we see Clover arriving at Punk Hazard at the front entrance. The front entrance we saw during the Punk Hazard arc that was all melted, and it had the warning signs on it that had like a symbol of like Orz's head or like a symbol of an ancient giant. It makes sense that that symbol would basically be like, so in One Piece, right, you have the skull and crossbones, but the skull and crossbones is like a pirate symbol, and Vegapunk did use it like in his lab over at Karakuri Island. Remember, Frankie pushed the button? So that is a symbol for like danger or like do not touch, but it also would make sense there'd be another symbol to differentiate it from the Jolly Roger. So this is the symbol of the ancient giants that probably way back in the day, you know, were like, you know, controlling the world and would cause absolute devastation. Like imagine giants the size of Oars, but like an entire army of them, or even maybe giants even bigger than Oars, you know, something that's like that made the mountain on Onigashima, something like that, right? If there were giants that big that used to exist in the world, it would make sense that that was kind of being ingrained in the minds of humans, like, that is danger, stay away from those things, right? So even now, maybe they still use that symbol as like, keep out danger, stay away, in lieu of like the skull and crossbones that's traditionally used in our world, because that's more about pirates in this world. So we see Vegapunk in his younger years. He still has his giant head, and none of the satellites exist yet, obviously. We see the dragons. We see, I think, the green dragon next to Vegapunk. That one was never named, and it's a little smaller here. And I think behind the walls of Punk Hazard, they're like in front of the gates, you know, like Vegapunk came out of the front entrance and is like talking to Clover kind of near the jungle. And then on the other side of the gate, you can kind of see this looming image, and I believe that's Dragon 13, the dragon that Zoro ultimately beheads during the Punk Hazard arc. Okay, so it's back there. So Vegapunk had been working on dragon engineering for years because the Tenryubito specifically wanted dragons to exist. I think it's because they used to rule dragons back in the day. Like they're called the, you know, that symbol is the hoof of the celestial dragon, and the Tenryubito is celestial dragon. So I think back in the day they used to ride around on dragons, and then they went extinct. Maybe some One Piece version of the Dance with Dragons moment or something. They all died, and now like that's still a memory for the Tenryubito. Like, we want dragons, and so they went to Vegapunk, who's the greatest scientist in the world, like, can you make us dragons? And Vegapunk's like, I could try, and he did pretty good. I think, honestly, he made dragons, right? So anyway, Clover is out there talking about this. He's like, hey, Vegapunk, we need your help to research the Void Century. We need your help to research history. Please. We need experts in various fields and everything like that for this to work. You're the most brilliant man in the entire world. So this had already been explained that Clover and Vegapunk knew each other. There was a little bit of a relationship there. We already saw Vegapunk going to Ohara 6 months after the disaster to kind of pay his respects and have a little monument and lay down the flowers. That's where he met Dragon. That's actually going to tie back into that flashback here in a moment. So, Clover and Vegapunk, you know, they might have communicated a little bit before this, but this might have been like the only time they actually met face to face. Clover looks a lot younger here. We knew Clover back in his younger days was like an adventurer, and he would like travel the world and like find a bunch of crazy like ruins and stuff, and constantly being chased after by the government and Cypherpole, constantly being arrested. Vegapunk even mentions right here, he's just like, Clover, what are you doing? You keep getting chased and arrested by the government, and you keep end up like escaping, or they let you go. Why do you think they do that? They do that so they can find your colleagues, you know, other people that are researching the Void Century, and they can bring you all to justice at once. So that's why they like let you go, or maybe they even let him escape a few times, right? And so, because they don't usually do that. The government will usually find you, and it's like, oh, you're researching the Void Century, then you're just going to be executed, right? Like, no questions asked. With Clover, because of how brilliant he is, and probably all the research he's been conducting, the government's like, yeah, no, let him go so we can follow him back to his den, and we can eliminate all of those damn researchers all at once, which is ultimately what does happen at Ohara, right? So Vegapunk is saying, I'm a government man now, I can't help you, all right? I can't, you know, leak any information that I was, you know, looking into to you, and also I can't research the Void Century because I work for the government now, right? So when Dragon met Vegapunk at Ohara, that was 22 years ago, right after the disaster, and Dragon mentions that Vegapunk had recently joined the government. Well, this is 26 years ago, and Vegapunk is working for the government now, so it might have been happened like this year or maybe right before this when Vegapunk joined up, okay? So this was right around at the end of the Mads time. Mads was mentioned to exist before the Vinsmoke children were born. So the oldest one of the Vinsmoke children is Reiju, and she's 24, so it would have been more than 24 years ago. I think it was over 30 years ago is when Mads was really in full swing, and right around 30 years ago is when they broke up and Vegapunk joined the government and stuff like that, right? It's just that Vegapunk didn't probably have a lot of communication with Dragon and Clover once he joined the government. I mean, every once in a while, maybe, but you gotta be careful with that, because if the government gets word that you're talking to Dragon or somebody, it's, you know, they're gonna bring it down on Vegapunk pretty hard, right? So interesting though is that Clover still has like his Clover is like hair color, because that's his hair is the giant Clover. It's like colored differently, like he's way younger here. But this is only 4 years before Ohara, and he was 85 when we see him at Ohara, and he looks like 20 years younger here, which is a little strange. Maybe he was like dyeing his hair or something like that, because he would be 81 here, and he looks like he's in his like 50s or 60s. He looks like 20 years younger than he is, you know, when he dies. But you know, who knows? Maybe he was still adventuring and running around at this time, and then he decided to settle down at Ohara, and he was like more like into a scholarly like dean position, like I am the dean of Ohara, I will educate others, and his sailing days were maybe behind him or something. But at any rate, we find out some lore involving Clover here that's really fascinating, okay? So Vegapunk basically says to him, hey, let the past be buried. You know, you're not going to find the answer to good and evil in some dusty old stories from the past. I mean, I would say that's a little bit like presumptuous on Vegapunk's part. He's like saying, hey, don't research the past. There's no answers to what you're looking for in the past. Why would they be there? Maybe it makes sense for Vegapunk's perspective of like, it's all the future, baby. You know, we're like advancing technology, but we can still learn stuff from history, right? Well, Clover responds to that by saying, hey, I once knew a man that had the D as his middle initial, and he was killed right in front of me. And he mentions that they grew up together. That was actually his older brother. And we have a very brief flashback of that moment where Clover is in front of a dead body. This is all in silhouette, so we don't really see what he looks like. But Clover's older brother had the Will of D. He was killed, and Clover had to lie and say, oh no, I mean, we're just friends. I'm not related to this guy. Because if he would have said, I'm related to him, I'm his little brother, then I guess the Cypherpole agents that killed him would know, oh, well, you also have the D, so you're gonna die too, right? So we find out Clover's full name. It is spelled like this. It is a Irish word, I believe, so that means we're going into Celtic mythology now. Yes, Celtic magic. Clover might come back as a ghost someday. Who knows, right? But it's Climb D Clover, I believe is the way you pronounce it. It's C-L-A and then an I, but there's like an accent over the I instead of just a dot. O-M-H, D Clover, all right? So that means that Clover is a member of the Will of D. I don't think anybody's really shocked or stunned about that. I mean, he was a brilliant scholar that was researching the Void Century very vigorously for, you know, decades. So it would make sense that he had the Will of D. Also, his brother had it too, so that means 2 extra people now that have the Will of D. We don't know his brother's name or what he looked like or anything, but we might learn about him more. So I think there was, up until now, there were 13 people that were confirmed to have the Will of D. I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but I think there was around 13, so I guess now there'd be 15 people that have the Will of D, and more scattered all over the world, right? So he's like, look, Vegapunk, I need to learn about what happened in the Void Century, because apparently what happened back then is still affecting things today. My older brother was killed for just saying his name. And he's like, tell me, how am I supposed to accept a world where someone's like name is enough for them just to be killed on the spot? All right, I gotta know he didn't literally did nothing wrong. He just said that's my name and he was killed, and I would have been killed too. So I'm not leaving it at that, Vegapunk. I need to know what happened back then. You need to help me, okay? Also, Vegapunk might be very careful in the way he's phrasing things here, because maybe he's assuming the government's listening to him. This is a government island after all. So maybe when Vegapunk said like, oh, don't research the past, let the past be buried. Maybe it's not because he doesn't want to research the past, but it's like he's kind of like, you know, we're on the government island right now. Clover, you should just let the past be, man. But then again, I mean, like, he says right after this, he's like, look, I'm not going to tell anybody about what you just told me. I'm not going to say what your real name is or the will of D, where this conversation never happened. But I cannot help you, unfortunately. I'm afraid I can't help you. Please be safe, though. I don't want to see you die. You are my friend, right? And so as Vegapunk is walking back into the facility, Clover says, you know, the voices of the past are crying out to you, Vegapunk. Can you not hear them? I'll solve this puzzle one day, and when I do, you won't be able to ignore the results. And so, I don't know if Clover is, I guess we'll find out in the anime. I'm not really sure if Clover is angry here, like, Vegapunk, the voices call out to you. You don't know. I'm gonna find out and you can't ignore it. Is he saying it out of anger, or is he saying it out of, like, desperation, or like, Vegapunk, just you watch. One of these days, I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna discover the history of the void, and then you won't be able to ignore it anymore. How do you think Clover was exactly framing this here? Because I'm getting a little bit more anger than just interest. I'm getting more of like he's mad at Vegapunk for not helping him. But at any rate, or mad at Vegapunk for taking the stance that he did. Like Vegapunk, same thing with Dragon, when Dragon was kind of talking to Vegapunk. Like the kind of stuff you could accomplish. Like if Vegapunk was working with Dragon or Clover, they might be able to actually take down the government. You know, he would be a huge asset. Instead, he joined the government. And it's like, dude, you could help us so much if you just like used your intellect, you know, to better the world here instead of working for them. But Vegapunk is very much dedicated to like, I have all these ideas in my head, I need to keep inventing. For that, I need resources, I need funding, and the government gives me the funding so I can keep inventing all this crazy stuff. Kind of being a little bit oblivious and kind of just ignoring all of the corruption and bad things the government does behind the scenes. It's just like the slavery and all that, Vegapunk might just kind of ignore and just be like, well, yeah, you know, that stuff's going on over there, but I'm able to, you know, do my research, so I'm going to focus on that. And I can see Clover and Dragon being understandably a little upset over that. You know, that makes sense. So now we cut forward 4 years, 22 years ago, right after the events of Ohara occurred. And this is still at Punk Hazard, where Caesar and Vegapunk learn about the Buster Call event. Caesar is, of course, giddy, and he's just like, no. I wish I could have been there to witness the destruction of Ohara. Those damn scholars, they got what was coming to them. I bet that people will think twice now before researching the Void Century. No. And so he's just being Caesar clown there. Caesar's age was retconned a while ago because he was originally listed at being 40 years old, and now he's 55. So in this flashback, he would now be like 33, something like that. Vegapunk would be in his 40s. So Vegapunk is very solemn, of course. He's not, you know, dancing for joy like Caesar is. He's just like, oh, Clover, and he's like remembering the last words that he said to him. You know, the past cries out to you, Vegapunk, please. And so Vegapunk looks down at Nico Robin's wanted poster, her first wanted poster with the 79 million when she was a child and she escaped Ohara. He was looking down. He's like, oh, just a lone child survived Ohara. Okay, and then this connects back later on when Shaka met Robin at Egghead. Is like, hey, there's something I've always wanted to talk to you about, you know. So the idea that like, oh, this was the last person that survived, you know, she carries the will of Ohara with her, okay? So then we see the flashback right before Vegapunk met Dragon at Ohara. We see Vegapunk on Ohara looking over the lake of books. It's like, oh, and he even mentions like, Clover, you must have had a way to escape. You know, you could have probably escaped if you really wanted to, but no, Clover chose to stay on the island and get some answers out of the Gorosei, even if it meant his death. So Vegapunk's like, you chose death. Was passing on your research that important? Didn't you realize that, he's like, you expect someone to follow in your footsteps and pick up your research after what happened here? So Caesar was kind of like, oh yes, Ohara, all of them died, so therefore who's gonna research the void now? Like, even if Clover would have left all of his notes in a book and like, here, carry on the legacy, be like, I'm not carrying on the legacy. Did you see what happened? That island got nuked. I don't want anything to do with this. You know what I mean? But Vegapunk is the one that ultimately does pick up the torch, and he does continue the research out of the care for his friend, all right? He's just like, you know what? No one else is going to do it, and Vegapunk is the most qualified to do it. So he's like, you know what? I am going to continue the research, Clover. I will do it, all right? Even if it means making an enemy out of the government. And we see this all leads up to Egghead currently, where Vegapunk left the message, the kill switch for everybody all over the world, right? Was that the best way he could have done that? I mean, people have brought up, like, you know, oh, yeah, it's very convenient for Vegapunk. Wait until he's dead, and then he springs all of this on the world. But, you know, he still did it. He still, you know, brought Clover's message to the entire world, right? So we continue his message. I guess the message is back up and rolling. You know, the Den Den Mushi inside of Emeth, the Iron Giant, woke back up, and it's just broadcasting again, right? And it's like, somebody once told me, you had a boyfriend who looked like a girlfriend that I had in February of last year. It's not confidential. Okay, all right. I'm sorry. Sometimes song lyrics, they just flow. Somebody told me that the voices of the past call out to you. History is written by the victors, which I believe is a quote by Winston Churchill. I think it might have been, it's one of those things where maybe somebody before Winston Churchill actually said that, but he says, history is written by the victors, and the words of the vanquished are, you know, cast into the dark ocean beneath the depths. I love that quote. It's adding on to the whole, like, yeah, history is written by the victors, but then the voices of the losers are lost in the abyss. And, you know, we have to really work hard to dig that up, okay? And we see that with the government. I mean, that's the perfect quote to use there, because that's what the government did. The government had this big war with the Ancient Kingdom. The government won, and then they kind of get to tell the story. They get to make it illegal to study the Void Century, and they burn and destroy as many books and records as you possibly can. And they just leave it at that, okay? And so you have the Cypherpole agencies all over the world that are enforcing this. You know, I was thinking, like, wouldn't it be interesting if there were, like, One Piece theorists in the One Piece world? You know, like, there have to be people in the One Piece world that notice weird shit going on every now and then, right? Like, here's a big one. Like, Luffy has the Will of D, right? And it's written on his bounty poster, like Monkey D. Luffy. Same thing with Blackbeard, Marshall D. Teach. Is it public knowledge that Dragon's name is Monkey D. Dragon and Garp's name is Monkey D. Garp? Because if so, then I would imagine not everybody, but a few people in the world would start to question, like, what's up with this? These are really prominent people, like really strong pirates and Marines that are showing up all throughout history that have this initial. That is weird, okay? The difference is the Cypherpole exists. So I imagine anybody in the One Piece world that gets curious about this and actually starts to do research, probably like a low-ranking Cypherpole agent would be enough to probably deter them from researching it. Like, imagine just being a regular dude in the One Piece world and you want to research this. Like, this is a little weird. So you go to the local library or university on your island and you're trying to research in the Will of D, but you really can't find anything. If you keep pushing it, trying to find out about this, eventually a Cypherpole 1 agent or something, because Cypherpole 1s, it's like 1 to 8 with the more important missions being the higher number, and then 9 is like the special missions, and then 0 is directly under the Tenryubito. But like, dude, you're in the library one day researching the Will of D, trying to figure out what this means, and then like a government agent sits down next to you with like shades and a suit and is just like, hey, we hear you're researching this D initial. It's like, oh yeah, I've been doing it for a while. It's like, yeah, you need to stop doing that. Because if you do keep going, we're going to arrest you and detain you. And he's like, oh, I don't want that. He's like, no, you don't. And maybe the government agent like flashes a gun or something. Like, you get my drift. You should probably stop doing this. And it's like, oh, right. I have kids and a family. He's like, yeah, I'm aware. And he's like, oh, that's not good. He's like, no, you should get up and go home and never look into this again. Because I don't think the government would be able to like, hey, there's somebody on that island researching the Will of D or the Void Century. I'll bomb the whole thing. You can't do that. And it was mentioned by Iceberg that like, you can know about the existence of the poneglyphs. That's okay. You can't just eliminate. That would be hard to enforce, to just kill everybody that knows about the poneglyphs. But just to research them, that's where trying to understand the script or trying to decode anything, that's what's illegal, right? So in the One Piece world, you got to be careful with like looking into this kind of stuff. I'm sure every now and then people notice, but most people just ignore it, or if they really push into it, that's when Cypherpole gets involved, right? Okay. We see a couple scenes all over the world. We have Patty and Zeph at the Baratier, which is great because that was like one of the few places that was very prominent. It's where one of the Straw Hats came from that we didn't really see their reaction to. So they're in the Baratier. looks like they're in like Zeph's office listening to the Den Den Mushi there. We also see Tequila Wolf, which is, I guess, back up in operation now, which that's actually really tragic because we assumed the Revolutionary Army ended that operation entirely, but I guess not. The operation was, I guess, stalled for a bit, but the Revolutionary Army, I guess, maybe didn't have the resources to hold that place, so they burst into the work camp and they freed everybody and they took out the guards and they arrested a lot of the government agents there and got them off, and then Robin was saved. But if the government, I mean, if the Revolutionary Army cannot hold Tequila Wolf, if they eventually had to abandon it, the government's going to come right back in and start right back up with the construction project. So it didn't end. It's still going. That might actually be low-key one of the most tragic things in this chapter, and it's only one panel. But I was always under the impression, well, Tequila Wolf, that giant bridge, well, at least the construction finally ended. Nope, it's still going again. Looks like the same guard, too. The same guard that was, like, whipping the crap out of Robin when she was there. So I don't know how that happened. If, like, the Revolutionary Army came in and freed a bunch of people and then left, and then they just like, well, back to work, I suppose, you know, and just, I don't know how that went down. I get it. The Revolutionary Army has, like thin resources, maybe, but it's tragic. We also see Robin. And this is very, very important as well. If the Straw Hats were listening to this message, because the Straw Hats are all running around right now, like Luffy's bouncing around fighting against 3 of the Gorosei, Zoro's clashing with Ethan, you know, Frankie's on the ship fighting as well, all the other Straw Hats are worried about getting out of there with the coup de burst, you know, like, are they listening to Vegapunk's message? They have any idea what's even going on with that right now? Robin is. Robin is in her room on the Thousand Sunny because she's still injured, so she's in the room and she's listening to Vegapunk's message via Den Den Mushi, okay? Maybe she didn't hear every single bit of it, but she heard a good chunk of it because she was kind of incapacitated the entire time, and she might have been listening to it while she was in the bed, and now she's in the Sunny. So she is hearing it. She does know what's going on, and maybe that's the reason why Oda kind of took her out of it for a little bit so she could be around to listen to it. So, you know, she'll fill the rest of the Straw Hats in on whatever they need to know, right? So, the words of the vanquished are usually cast into the ocean. That being said, the truth can still come to light if the oppressed carry it on their backs and endure. So it's kind of like, and they also, as they say, as the oppressed carry it on their backs and endure, we see slaves being whipped at Tequila Wolf. So it's the idea of like, look, it's going to cause a lot of death and a lot of suffering in order to bring the truth to light. You know, Clover died. Dragon and the Revolutionary Army are risking their lives for this, and Vegapunk eventually dies. But if that's what is necessary to bring the Void Century to light, to let this story be known, with the government in control, people are gonna die. But if that's what you really want to do, is to bring the world to light, that's what's going to happen, I suppose, is what Vegapunk's saying here, okay? So we cut back to the Labophase, where they're ready to blast off. Zoro and Jinbei are on the Thousand Sunny. They're ready to launch over the cloud down into the water below. However, Ethan is still there. So Ethan and Zoro, like Zoro knocked him away, but Ethan is like charging towards the Sunny, like straight on. And so they're like, we can't get out of here because Lilith has run the calculations. Lilith being a Vegapunk, she pulls out like, hey, look, I did the numbers and the calculations and the physics of this, and, you know, drop force and gravity 99.82 milliseconds square. I did the numbers on this, okay? And if our trajectory gets messed up a little bit, like if we fire off a coup de burst and then Ethan, like, even if he doesn't like slice the ship in half, if he just like alters our trajectory a little bit, we might come crashing down into Egghead below. So we have to have this perfect, right? We cannot have him interfere. And so they're arguing about that a little bit. Ethan is coming down, and then that is when all of a sudden Atlas arrives from below. She pops out, and then she just decks Lilith on the floor of the Sunny. So Lilith has no idea what's going on. Lilith is like, hey guys, I don't know, this is gonna be really hard for us to, hey Atlas, what are you doing? Boom! Just punches Lilith as hard as she can, just gets dropped into the Sunny's floor, it cracks, and then she grabs something behind Lilith's head, and you hear a snap sound effect. And then everyone's like, Atlas, what are you doing? And she's like, I'll leave Lilith in your hands. Take good care of her. Leave now. Take off. I'll make sure you get down in one piece. Roll credits. But I am Atlas, number 5 Vegapunk of Wrath. And it's time I clock into work, damn it. And so Atlas has this really cool scene where she just looks at the rest and just get going, just coup de burst and launch off. York senses that Lilith's connection to Punk Records has been severed. And this is something that, okay, at first I originally assumed, what if Atlas just knocked out Lilith and turned off her connection to Punk Records, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, they could do that? Well, why didn't they do that earlier? Why couldn't, like, because we kind of knew that York was able to hide things from Punk Records, and so why couldn't the other Vegapunks do that as well? Maybe York still had a connection to Punk Records, but she just chose to withhold certain information, but maybe there was some information she couldn't withhold. At any rate, I think what Atlas just did was permanently sever the connection. Like, literally, Atlas, like, grabbed Lilith's, like, hard line of, like, the cable that connects her directly to Punk Records and just ripped it out of her skull, okay? So, it's like forcibly, like, unplugging, just ripping something like a cable out of your computer, okay? So, and Atlas looks kind of, like, upset when she's doing it. She doesn't look like she's, like, oh, this is gonna suck, but, you know, but Lilith is still alive. She doesn't say Lilith's dead or anything like that. It's just like, look, we need to make sure that York thinks that Lilith is dead, because if they think that Lilith is still alive and she's connected, then the Gorosei are gonna be coming after you. So I'm gonna sever the hard line with her. They'll think she's dead, and then I'm gonna go and, you know, sacrifice myself for Ethan so you guys can get away. And then they'll believe that York is the only Vegapunk left, and and Lilith will still be alive, okay? So what this means is, I think when Lilith regains consciousness, she'll still be a Vegapunk. She'll still have her personality and her intelligence and everything, but she will no longer be able to connect back to Punk Records. That connection has been severed, okay? But at any rate, yeah, Lilith is gonna make it out of this okay, so we still have her, okay? And at that rate, Ethan is charging for the ship. Atlas fires off with her jetpack and just kind of like grabs onto Ethan. It's like, guys, go! Ethan like slices off her arm, and then Jinbei and everyone's like, all right, Brooke, activate the coup de burst. And Brooke's like, yo, okay. And then the Thousand Sunny shoots off with a cloud. Jinbei's at the helm, like, hold on, this is gonna get bumpy. And it's like, oh man, here we go. And they're launching. And yeah, at the last moment, as Ethan is like dead center, Atlas turns on her jetpack and her Dom shoes at like full power and like, you know, changes the trajectory of Ethan. Now, Ethan is huge, keep in mind, but Atlas was mentioned at the beginning of this arc when Luffy and the gang first saw Atlas, was like, oh wow, she's like as big as Kaido was, okay, so she's really big too. So, grapples Ethan, you know, succeeds on that strength save and just, you know, just pulls him off to the side a little bit. And then she activates her self-destruct sequence, blowing herself up, allowing the Straw Hats to escape. And then the shockwave of the explosion kind of bumps them, you know, far enough to get them to the shore. I'm skipping ahead a little bit in the chapter, but that's like the sequence of events that happens, so I don't want to, like, you know, skip back later. That's what happens, all right? So Atlas sacrifices herself. I mean, I would say I'm surprised, but look, guys, I never had anything against Atlas. I swear, seriously. It's just, I always saw the shadow of death on her. I don't know, it's just vibes, I guess. I don't know how to describe it. It's just, all the Vegapunks were revealed at a certain point, and I'm like, yeah, Atlas is probably gonna die at some point, right? It was like with the 9 red scabbards when they all showed up. I didn't know Ashura Doji was gonna die, but I was looking at the 9 red scabbards and I'm like, yeah, 1 or 2 of these guys are probably gonna die during this arc, right? And I just felt that with Atlas dying. that was how it went. So, she's dead. She sacrifices herself, but she did it so the Straw Hats could escape. Good job, Atlas. Good job. All right. So they do coup de burst. We cut down to the Labophase now, where we have Emeth, the Iron Giant, at the shore, blocking off the Gorosei from, you know, attacking the Great Eric, the Elbaf ship, as they're leaving. Hound is there, a Vice Admiral, and they're like, you know, Vice Admiral Hound, what's going on here? There's a giant bird, and then there was a sneck, and then there was a boar, and we don't know what's going on. And Hound is like, I have no idea what's going on with this either. So Vice Admiral also has no idea what the Gorosei are or what madness is happening right here. Luffy is, of course, super surprised, and all the giants are like, whoa, look at the Iron Giant over there, that guy's cool. And then the Iron Giant, Emeth, begins to communicate with Luffy and begins to say, ah, Joy Boy, I'm happy we get to meet again. It's been so long. And Luffy's like still in gear 5th, like bouncing around like, you talking to me? My name's Luffy, not Joy Boy. And Emeth is just like, you so funny. I came, like before, to help you. Your enemy is my enemy. I am glad I can fight for you again, Joy Boy. And Luffy's like, you can talk, that's cool. Because Luffy has no idea what's going on here. Also, very interesting, he says, I came to help you like before. So maybe that's implying something with like his attack on Marijois 200 years ago, or another event that occurred back in the day where Emeth, arrived at the last minute to save Joy Boy or something, right? And so there was like some orders he was given by Joy Boy that he's still like fulfilling to this day. Also, Vegapunk's message is still going on in the background, which makes it kind of confusing to like relay to you guys. But while Emeth and Luffy are having this conversation, Vegapunk's message is going, I realize it would be foolish to blindly trust in a one-sided account of a 900-year-old battle. But I think I should be able to scrutinize and learn from the past from every possible perspective. I only wish I had more time. So it's basically Vegapunk is talking about how, like, look, we can learn from the past, but we got to study the past from, like, every possible angle of scrutiny, okay? Not to be too biased. And he's like, I just wish I had more time to study more of this, right? You know, if I only had more time, I could research more, right? So Emeth says, I will fight alongside you again, Joy Boy. I will protect you from danger. You get out of here. I will hold these monsters off. And we see Peter and Top Man in their animal forms, and the sandworm and in the boar kind of looming over them. We're going to see Saturn here in a moment, too. And then we have the Gorosei saying, we must pound them into dust. It seems Vegapunk's speech is all but over. I mean, at this point, he's kind of said what he was going to say. Stopping it right now, I don't think is really going to matter much. It really does seem like Vegapunk is winding down, and it might be actually the end of the broadcast at the very end of this chapter. Maybe it might go on for a little longer, but I can kind of see this as the conclusion, right? So, I mean, the message is out. The cat's out of the bag, so to speak, right? So, all of the giants are like, all right, let's go, everybody, back out to sea, because you know they got pushed back a little bit with Peter's suction ability, so now they're going out to sea again. Luffy shows up, and Dory is like, oh, hey, Straw Hat, is that Iron Giant a friend of yours? And Luffy's like, oh, no, I mean, I didn't really know the guy, but he said he was protecting something, and he called me some guy named Joy Boy? Or maybe he was protecting a guy named Joy Boy? I didn't really get it, whatever. I don't know why people keep calling me that. My name's Luffy. It's on my wanted poster. It's like, okay. And the giants are a little strange because they're like, we didn't actually, wait, he was talking to you? It's like, oh yeah. It's like, we didn't hear anything. He was talking to you? We didn't hear a single thing. So this is Luffy's voice of all things. Also something that Clover probably had too, when Clover says, you know, the voices of the past, you know, speak to you. Clover was probably talking about hearing the voices of all things. Luffy is hearing the voice of Emeth that nobody else can hear, just like the Sea Kings. And something about the end of this chapter, which I think is going to let light on something, and we'll see where this goes, but it could go a few different directions, okay? At any rate, Bluegrass, who is still in her child form after getting, you know, affected by the Toshi Toshi no Mi via Bonnie, she's like, all right, well, enough chit-chat, everybody. Still, fire, shoot at the Great Eric. We could still stop them. So the marine vessels continue their barrage. We have Peter in a really cool spread looming over Emeth in the sandworm form, like even with Emeth being this huge iron giant, the sandworm is still bigger, and it's like about to like devour Emeth. He holds up his arm like he's about to do a rocket punch, and Frankie and Sanji and Luffy are all like, you know, like, oh my god, it's gonna be a rocket punch, here we go. It's actually really interesting. Sanji, of all people, still is like, Sanji, I mean, he's a guy, so of course like giant robots are cool, but I don't know, have we ever seen Sanji super expressive over like giant robot lasers? Like the same way that Chopper and Frankie and Usopp and Luffy have been that way? I don't know, but Sanji is just like, he has the sparks in his eye too. He's like, laser beam? You know, a robot rocket fist? What's gonna happen? So even Sanji's excited about this. Frankie is as well. Luffy, of course, is. And so Emeth is ready to, like, getting ready to attack. Shit. Oh, shit. It's a little bit rusted. All right, hold on. Give me a second. Oh! And then, so Peter just comes down and just, like, devours one of Emeth's arms, and it just gets ripped off immediately, and Emeth has to, like, hold back the sandworm, like, his other arm, like, oh! Oh, my body's falling apart here. This isn't good here. The last 900 years have rendered these weapons inoperable. Damn it, I need some Anybody have some WD-40 over there? An oil can, anything. Some kind of lubricant. So this isn't good, but hey, he's holding them back for the moment at least. Saturn, meanwhile, jumps on the back of Peter and then jumps off of Peter as the sandworm onto the ship. That's a weird sentence, but so Saturn in his spider form, in his Ushioni form, lands on the bow of the Great Eric and just like, and I was like, oh man, Gorosei on deck, Gorosei on deck, emergency, all right, we need to fight this thing now. He's like, I will not let you escape, Bonnie, Kuma, It's like, he's being very like horror movie monster right about now, right? Sanji's not paying attention to that. Sanji looks up in the sky at the same time the Sunny shoots off. Atlas explodes, setting off a huge bomb, and then that pushes the Sunny so it's gonna land in the water. So the plan worked out okay there. You know, Zoro's like, hold on, we're going down. Ethan is like there, and half of his face got blown off in Atlas's explosion, but he's healing perfectly fine. That's another good example of this. I mean, we already saw it when Kuma, like, decked Saturn, but in this panel, like, half of Ethan's face was obliterated. Like, his brain, his eye, everything, and now it's just, you know, just, like, forming back together again, okay? So, this is probably gonna actually, this might tie back into something involving Clover's name. You know, so wait until the end and I'll talk about that, okay? So we have a double page spread at the very end of the chapter here as the Sunny is falling and it's right above the Great Eric and York is like, Atlas is dead, Lilith is dead, I'm the only Dr. Vegapunk left, and the other Gorosei are like, not yet, the Stella has spoken too much, so they need to still eliminate, you know, the Iron Giant and the message, right? And Emeth, in response, as all of the Gorosei are like trying to destroy Emeth, I mean, it's very clear Emeth lost an arm and there's smoke billowing out of him and he probably can't stay turned on for very long. So he's like, I have rusted away, Joy Boy. Well then, I know what I must do now. This is the time, right? Can I use it? Like he asks a question, can I use it? All right. Last scene of the chapter, Vegapunk says, I am confident you have all come to the same conclusion at this point, and I anticipate that it will ultimately determine how things transpire in the future. Roger and his crew must have heard the voices of the past from the purest source possible. Now, the very last panel is a group of prisoners in Impel Down that are hearing the name Gold D. Roger and being like, Gold D. Roger? Wasn't it Gold Roger? Wait a minute, he had a D in his name? Gold D. Roger, huh? Now, lot of things to unpack here, all right? Like, I'm gonna try to... Okay, it all connects together, it's just what manner of, like, addressing first, okay? So, the voice of all things, let's talk about that. When Roger and his crew were at Laughtail, remember Roger laughed, and then he said, oh, Joy Boy, I wish I lived in the same era as you. Then here you have Emeth, hey, this body is rusting away. Can I use it now, Joy Boy? As if he's asking a question, like he's waiting for approval. Now, he could be waiting for approval from Luffy. Maybe Luffy might say, yeah, sure, go for it. I don't know what that means, but go for it. What if Joy Boy's voice is like, the voice of all things and stuff can, like, you can hear the voices from the past. Like, literally, like, 900 years ago, Joy Boy is saying stuff, giving orders, and his voice, his message, is literally being carried through the future. Emeth can hear it. So when Emeth is talking to, like, Joy Boy, can I use it now? He's, like, literally maybe communicating with Joy Boy back in the Void Century right now. Like, across time and space, they are communicating somehow. And then Vegapunk says, they heard the truth. And Vegapunk just got done saying that, like, studying the past from every possible angle, every possible perspective. But he mentions the Roger Pirates heard the past from the purest source possible. Now, it's simply, maybe Vegapunk was simply meaning that when Roger learned about the Void Century, they learned it from, like, the writings of Joy Boy. Like, Joy Boy etched down in the poneglyphs, you know, that was the Void. Or, what if he meant purest source possible? Like, when Roger got to Laughtail, there was a voice of Joy Boy. Not a ghost of Joy Boy, not like a spirit or anything, but literally the voice of Joy Boy from 900 years years ago spoke to Roger from across time and space and is like, this is my story. So to reiterate, it wasn't like Roger saying that for the sake of like, oh, I read your story, Joy Boy. I wish I lived in the same era as you because I read your autobiography or something, right? No, it was literally like Roger was having a talk with Joy Boy. And he was like, oh, Joy Boy, I wish I lived in the same era as you. And Joy Boy actually responded with something maybe like, oh, he's like, well, I wish I maybe, you know, could have met you too, Roger. You seem like a stand-up guy. Yarg! Yarg! And it's like, maybe there's something like that going on here. I'd be okay with that. Because it doesn't really contradict anything in One Piece. It's not time travel. It's not like Joy Boy, I mean, it's not like Roger went back to the past or anybody's going back to the past. It's not that, you know, Joy Boy is a ghost or something in the future, like communicating with people. It's just he's talking through the past in the history, you know what I mean? Like something. I don't know how it would work. Maybe a devil fruit, maybe some other feature of the sun god fruit, maybe Toki's fruit has some ability to do that. I mean, honestly, Toki being able to send people in the future, maybe she does have an ability where she could send a voice or a message into the future as well. Now, would that message be like a two-way communication? That's another story, but still, pretty interesting stuff. So I think Emeth, I'm going to revive the idea that Kuma was going to have like a nuke in his chest and he was going to blow up the entire island. I think that's going to be Emeth now. I think Emeth is going to have the nuke inside of him. Hopefully it still works after 900 years. And he's going to detonate that explosion. And then that's going to blow up all of the Gorosei and maybe not kill them, but render them inoperable for a time so that everybody can get away, right? And like all of Egghead just gets, you know, just like incinerated. You know, it might be something like that, right? As for everybody finding out in the world that Roger is actually Gold D Roger, obviously to us that's not a big deal. To them it is a big deal. I also will question, because during Marineford it was mentioned that Porcus D Ace was the son of Gold Roger. So, you know, once again, like everybody knows Luffy's name has the D in it. Do people know Dragon's full name, Monkey D. Dragon? And they know Garp's full name, Monkey D. Garp? Because if they did, it's very obvious that D initial is a hereditary thing. And then it's like, wait a minute, Porcus D. Ace was Roger's son? Well, then wouldn't that mean Gold Roger also had the D? I mean, then again, people might not be paying attention to this that much because they don't really care, you know? But everybody in the world now knows. I mean, Kureha revealed it a long time ago because Kureha remembered it well. It's like, oh, Gold D Roger, not Gold Roger, right? But still, everybody knows now that he had the Will of D, and so more people might be researching it, and it might be more than the government can handle. Like, everybody in the world all at once is just like, hey, we need to research the Will of D, and the government can't keep up or something, right? So anyway, damn, that was a good chapter. So, Saturn is still on the deck of the ship, right? Like, I think he is. Hold on, let me just go back really quick here just so I can double check. Okay, so Saturn lands, maybe it's not on the bow of the Great Eric, maybe it was the stern because it was on the back of the ship. So he lands, and then they look up and they see the Thousand Sunny falling, and then Atlas explodes, and then we just have the final scene of the chapter where I think Saturn is still on the ship, so they still have to deal with that guy. That's going to be a problem. But at least when it comes to Peter and Top Man, I think Emeth's going to be able to deal with that. Mars still got blasted away into the stratosphere, and you know, Ethan is a little bit encumbered at the moment after recovering from the explosion, so that might take him a bit, right? But he doesn't look like, you know, he's healing, and he's just like, oh, we still have to eliminate Vegapunk's message. So he doesn't seem like he's like out of commission. It seems like, give me a couple seconds to heal and I should be right back to it, right? So all Atlas did was manage to veer him off course for like 5 seconds, right? And the explosion helped, right? But oh, anyway, R.I.P. Atlas. And R.I.P. Edison, and R.I.P. Pythagoras, and R.I.P. Shaka, and R.I.P. Dr. Vegapunk. York and Lilith were the only ones to make it out of this okay, which I'm fine with. Okay. So, yeah, that's the end of the chapter. The other thing I will bring up here at the end was, so Clover's name is a reference to Climb Solas. It's Irish or like old like Gaelic and something. I don't know how to pronounce stuff. But it's the Sword of Light. It's a trope that appears a lot in Irish or Celtic fiction. Okay? And the story kind of goes that like, it's a bunch of different kinds of story. It's not a one particular story. It's a trope. It's something that appears in a lot of different tales. Okay? So the idea is there is a hero that is off to go save a woman, like a princess in the tower kind of situation. And all of these stories have a few things in common, like that the woman he saves ends up getting married to him. So it's like a quest for my wife sort of thing, which were very prevalent back in the day. So there's that element, and then there's also the element of, you know what, I'll use Sode no Shirayuki for this. The Sword of Light. And the Sword of Light is a blade, the only blade that can deal with like a demon or something. So it's like there's a princess in the tower and it's guarded by a demon man, and the noble knight on a quest has to defeat the demon in order to save the woman, and they can get married and live happily ever after. Well, the demon is really strong, and so normal conventional weapons do not work. So you need the Sword of Light. And hold on a minute, I have one that might work a little bit better over here. I have the Master Sword. This might work a little bit better. I have the Sword of Light. And even then, the sword itself might not be enough to defeat the demons. It's a story that usually goes down to like there being a particular spot on the demon's body or on the dragon's body or whatever you're fighting that you have to pierce. Like, yes, I have the Sword of Light. I will pierce your left nipple, your weak point. And just like, no! Demon explodes, turns to ash. The noble knight saves the woman and is like, I love you, let's get married. Okay, happily ever after. Do. Okay, whatever. This is an interesting parallel here, if this is the reference to Clover's name, Climb D Clover, Climb Solas, Sword of Light, because it could be a thing like there's a special weapon that you need to get your hands on in order to defeat the Gorosei, and you need to stab them at a very particular spot on their body to kill them. So they're going to Elbath, and Othin has a lot of magical tchotchkes in his vault in Norse mythology. There's a magic spear. There's a spear that the sun god wields, you know, Nika in the image and everything like that, wields a spear, wields a sword. So maybe they'll get some stuff from Elbath, and then Luffy gets a really cool sword. He's used swords before in the story, so that's not unusual. If Luffy picks up a really cool magic sword or a spear and uses that's kind of makes sense. Luffy's used swords before, and then he uses that. He tries to stab one of the Gorosei. It doesn't work, and it's like, oh, but it's the magic sword. It's supposed to work. And it's like, well, you got to stab him in a very, very particular spot, which knowing Oda, it's probably his dick. And then just like, all right, stab the spider in his dick. It's like, okay. And just like, boom, and he explodes. And then that's how you kill the Gorosei. Maybe make it a little bit more elaborate than that, but that's the general vibe, maybe. All right. Well, anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Tekking signing out. I'm going to be out of town this coming weekend, so, you know, the follow-up videos and stuff and the streams and things might be a little bit sparse. I'm going to try to get a stream out done tomorrow morning before I leave, but if not, I won't be back until Monday or Tuesday, and then I'll get back to the videos then. So thanks for everybody watching and the support and all that. Signing out. Go to the end screen. I'm sorry if you were a fan of Atlas. Now you know how I felt when Edison died. It sucks, but hey, at least Lilith made it out okay. The first Vegapunk the Straw Hats meet survives. Lilith for Straw Hat. Let's go.